All right, guys, a cute little look there at the DC Eagles. Those are the Southeast Anacostia River Eagles who are growing up so fast. They're big and gray now, and we've been tracking them. You can actually vote for their names on the website now, eaglecam.org, courtesy of Earth Conservation Corps, and we're going to have more footage of them coming up on the show. But for now, guys, welcome to Fox 5 Live. It's Monday, April 9th. I'm Molly Nivola here in the newsroom, and let's start right away with some of the live stuff that's going on right now. We have a live camera over on Capitol Hill. Nothing really is happening as we speak, but you can see here this live look inside one of the buildings here as Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, of course, is arriving on the Hill in advance of his Wednesday testifying before Congress. Now, he said he's going to be testifying there this Wednesday, as we know, and this all happens today, which is the day that 87 million users who may have had their data shared by Cambridge Analytica are getting a detailed message on their app. So if you guys are Facebook users and you have opened your app and you see that message, apparently there are two different screens that you may see, and you're able to tell if you are one of the people that were kind of swept up in that scandal where your information may have been shared after taking a quiz and your friends may have gotten the information from you via that quiz. So that is what we've been watching. I know a lot of the world is really watching this. We have some mics set up here. I just saw Chad Pergram from Fox News. He may have more of an update coming up, but we'll make sure we jump over to this scene here. This is live on Capitol Hill if anybody does speak, because we're going to track this and we're going to be watching this for a couple days very closely until he testifies on Wednesday. But before we do that, really interesting, we had our political reporter Tom Fitzgerald, who you've seen here numerous times on his Sunday show. He actually interviewed a gentleman named Matt Brown, a cyber expert from ShorePoint, who detailed more about the scandal, more about Zuckerberg, and actually mentioned what he would ask Mark Zuckerberg in the wake of all this during the questioning, what questions he would have for him. So I'm going to play out that interview now for a little more insights to this whole Facebook thing, what's going on today. This was from yesterday. Check it out.
American students recall.
Questions they're going to be asked this week in one of the biggest privacy investigations of the social media giant. Facebook says now that more than tens of millions of people have had their information exposed in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. CEO Mark Zuckerberg spoke out saying the company made a huge mistake and will testify before Congress this week.
But it's clear now that we didn't do enough. We didn't focus enough on preventing abuse and thinking through how people could use these tools to do harm as well. And that goes for fake news, foreign interference in elections, hate speech, in addition to developers and data privacy.
It's estimated up to 87 million people have been affected by all of this. That might be on the high end. Cambridge Analytica itself says that number is probably closer to around 30 million. However, joining us this morning to talk about the ins and outs of privacy and a lot of the stuff that we've learned this week is Matt Brown with ShorePoint. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, Mark Zuckerberg's coming up to the Hill 2 days, meeting with the Senate, meeting with the House. For a minute here, let's just wave a magic wand over your head and make you a senator or a congressman on this panel. What's your first question for Mark Zuckerberg?
Have they done enough? I think that's the big question, right? When Facebook was put together, most of these social media platforms, when they were put together, they did not envision the way the data was being used today. They didn't firstly envision how much data that they're collecting on individuals. And I think now they're having to really rethink exactly how to protect that information, what their role is in it, and how do they make awareness to their user community about how that information is being used.
You know, when Facebook first came out, everybody kind of thought it was this great free thing that they got. And it was. However, there seemed to be a misunderstanding from folks that that the product Facebook was selling was its users. Mm-hmm. Their users' information, their users' likes, their users' dislikes. How much of this is concerning as to what Facebook actually did with this data, and how much of it is the maturity of its own users and now finally figuring out what Facebook was all about from the get-go?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, but I think certainly any user that is looking at the value of social media platforms and what they want to put out there has to be educated in how that data is being used and what controls are put in place to protect that information. But that's true not just of Facebook or social media. It's true of loyalty programs at your grocery store. All right, I mean, all of that essentially the reason they're given that loyalty program is to collect data about yourself so they can exploit you, most of it for marketing purposes. But in the cases of social media, there's nefarious users out there. The data gets a little bit more widely spread.
There's a lot of people probably spending some time on this part of Facebook that we just saw there, the settings section this week, looking at what their settings are. What can you tell people about the things that they can actually do themselves to maybe limit some of this privacy exposure?
Yeah, certainly. Pay attention to the privacy settings on any social media site. Typically under your login, there's the settings app, and there's privacy information there. Look at the controls that the platform allows you to take advantage of. Anytime you sign up, most every social media outlet leaves them wide open. If you think about it, the more data they collect, the more valuable it is for their business. So they're going to keep those controls pretty wide open. So make sure that you pay attention to what they are, how to use them, educate yourself on what's applicable, how that data is being used.
You know, Facebook's always been kind of a little shy about talking to themselves. They've been out there a lot over the last
It
week.
had to be.
Is it enough for them to go up to the Hill, Mark Zuckerberg, and say, I'm sorry and we should have done more? Are members of Congress going to hear concrete things that have to change, or maybe even look into some legislation about this?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, look, Facebook has a problem right now. You've seen it by the drop of stock price that they've had. You've seen it by some high-profile users that are deleting their accounts. They have a visibility issue that they're addressing. So capitalism will work to some degree here and kind of right the ship and force them to implement changes that they need to make. But the government certainly plays a role to make sure that they're kind of holding their feet to the fire a little bit and making sure that they're looking at these things.
Well, hopefully something gets cooked on that fire at some point rather than just a lot of table pounding, which is, unfortunately, a lot of times what we see out of hearings like this. So we'll see. Matt Brown, we appreciate you joining us this morning from Short Point. All right, well, as we continue this Sunday morning, up next, the Maryland State.
All right, guys, so that was an interview Sunday morning with Tom Fitzgerald there on the desk with cyber expert Matt Brown from Short Point. And like I mentioned, all 2.2 billion Facebook users today are apparently receiving a notice entitled Protecting Your Information with a link to see what you can do to kind of keep all that contained and kind of close down or take off the apps that you have information being shared out of. There's a lot of obviously convoluted rules with the Facebook settings, as we know, but I'm curious, any of you out there, are you guys worried about this? Are you part of this? Did you perhaps receive a notice and are thinking about it today? Because it's definitely on a lot of people's minds, as Zuckerberg, of course, has arrived in DC. He's here on the Hill, and he is going to be talking on Wednesday. We're going to make sure we watch that closely. Here's a live look at that entrance that we had. Nothing really going on there. Like I said, a couple mics set up. We believe somebody will be speaking, but for now, let's switch it over because we have a couple other live feeds coming in. Here is a brief, just a few moments ago, playback from the president, President Trump, and his cabinet. This is his cabinet meeting this morning. He had some remarks on some of the big topics that we've been talking about today, and this is it. So this is playing out just a few minutes after it happened. Here's President Trump.
I'd also like to provide an update on trade negotiations. We have a situation with China where we have a very good relationship with China, and I think we'll maintain that relationship. I'm very good friends with President Xi. I have great respect for President Xi. And as you know, I spent 2 days in China. The President spent 2 days with us at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and they were 4 great days. With that being said, China has been taking advantage of the United States for many years. Really, if you look at it, since the start of the World Trade Organization, and they have really done a number on this country. And I don't blame China. I blame the people running our country. I blame presidents. I blame representatives. I blame negotiators. We should have been able to do what they did. We didn't do it. They did. And it's the most lopsided set of trade rules, regulations that anybody's ever seen. With that being said, we have many of them. NAFTA was a horrible deal. We're renegotiating it. We'll see what happens. But we're strongly renegotiating NAFTA. If you look at the European Union, they have tremendous barriers, trade barriers. We essentially have bad deals with everyone. We're close to finishing a deal with South Korea, which was a horrible deal. It was going to give us 200,000 jobs. Well, that didn't exactly happen. It gave them 200,000 jobs. We lost jobs. And it was a horrible deal. And that's being renegotiated. And we have We have a long way to go, but we've made a tremendous progress. We're fairly close on NAFTA, and if we don't make the right deal, we'll terminate NAFTA, and we'll make the right deal after that. But we have a chance to make a deal on NAFTA. And as I said, the North Korea and South Korea situation, which complicates it, the deal that we have with South Korea, I think is going to be, I think it's going to be a very fair deal. We want a fair deal, and we don't have fair deals. North Korea, by the way, as you've probably seen, and we've been in touch with North Korea, we'll be meeting with them sometime in May or early June. And I think there'll be great respect paid by both parties, and hopefully we'll be able to make a deal on the de-nuking of North Korea. If they've said so, we've said so. Hopefully it'll be a relationship that's much different than it's been for many, many years. This should have been done by other presidents, and they decided they didn't do it. They couldn't have done it. But it would have been a lot easier if it were done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a lot easier than now. But we have a meeting that is being set up with North Korea, so that'll be very exciting, I think, for the world. I think it's going to be a very exciting thing for the world. We're going to be talking about opioid today, opioid destruction and drug destruction. As you know, we strengthened up our southern border. Last year we had record low numbers. This year they've gone up. To a certain extent, it might be because our economy is good and people are trying to come into our good economy. But we're putting the National Guard and military at the border. We're beefing up the Border Patrol, who've done a fantastic job. ICE has done a fantastic job, and we will take care of that situation. We need a wall. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, we need a wall. And it'll stop your drug flow. It'll knock the hell out of the drug flow, and it'll stop a lot of people that we don't want in this country from coming into our country. But right now, we're putting the military and we're putting the National Guard, and we're going to have very strong borders. We have strong borders now, but they're going to be much stronger. And with that, the cabinet meeting will begin. We're going to be discussing a lot of different elements of what's going on. The country is doing very well. We've created 3 million jobs since the election. We have 700,000 jobs in the last number of months. The numbers are starting to come out from companies, corporations. They're doing incredibly well. It's very solid. Our country is on very solid footing. When we do a deal with China, which probably we will, if we don't, they'll have to pay pretty high taxes to do business with our country. That's a possibility. But if we do a deal with China, if during the course of a negotiation they want to hit the farmers because they think that hits me, I wouldn't say that's nice, but I tell you, our farmers are great patriots. These are great patriots. They understand that they're doing this for the country, and we'll make it up to them. And in the end, they're going to be much stronger than they are right now. Don't forget, farmers have been trending downward over an 8-year period. Their numbers have trended downward, in some cases significantly. So between NAFTA and China and all of the things we're doing, we're going to make them much better than they've ever been. But during this period of time, Sonny Perdue is here. He understands exactly what I'm saying. There'll be a little work to be done, but the farmers will be better off than they ever were. It will take a little while to get there, but it could be very quick, actually. But I say it's not nice when they hit the farmers specifically because they think that hits me. So with that being said, we're doing very well on trade and trade deals. I think deals will be made. I think we're going to make deals with a lot of countries that have taken advantage of us. And we will be reporting back to everybody. And we'll start our cabinet meeting. And thank you all, media, press. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Thank
do you
you.
still want to get out of Syria? Do you still want to get out of Syria?
We're going to make a decision on all of that. In particular, Syria. We'll be making that decision very quickly, probably by the end of today. But we cannot allow atrocities like that. Cannot allow it.
Does Putin bear responsibility for this?
He may, yeah, he may. And if he does, It's going to be very tough, very tough. You'll pay a price. Everybody's going to pay a price. He will, everybody will. Excuse me?
U.S. military action, is it off the table as
Nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table. Well, they're saying they're not, but to me, there's not much of a doubt, but the generals will figure it out probably over the next 24 hours. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Are you concerned about stock market?
No, not at all. No. The market's up today very substantially. No, not at all. Don't forget, our country's going to be much stronger when this is all finished, just so you understand. You know, these trade deals are horrible. Our country is going to be much stronger when this is finished. Okay? So that's very important. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
All right, so a little inside look right prior to President Trump's cabinet meeting this morning at the White House. I want to go back to another topic, though. As you know, we covered the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination last week. That was April 4th. But today, on April 9th, it's actually the anniversary of his funeral service at Ebenezer Baptist Church. It's a church in Atlanta, Georgia, where Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was baptized as a child, and then later he gave a trial sermon at the age of 19, and he was later ordained as a minister here at this church. And today, that same Baptist church in Atlanta is hosting a commemorative service to mark the 50th anniversary of the funeral for the civil rights legend. So let's peep in there and check into this Atlanta service, which is commemorating the anniversary of that funeral.
Sister Yolanda Renee King. And so as they prepare to come, I'd like to get out of the way and bring Jacqueline up for a special introduction. We can stand and receive them.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I would like to introduce a new friend from Parkland, Florida. Who introduced me to the world during the March for Our Lives, Jacqueline Corin.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So on February 14th, my school was filled with a lot of hate, and my community fell into a state of mourning. And it was really hard for me to watch all my neighbors and friends go from a state of liveliness to sitting at the crosses of 17 people that we lost at our local park. And almost immediately afterwards, some of my friends and I put our foot down. We had watched this happen so many times throughout our lives, and it's just unacceptable at this point. So we decided to create the March for Our Lives. And it started on a living room floor of my friend's house, and we had no idea that 2 million people would be marching with us worldwide just a month later. And the march was created not only to commemorate the lives of people from Parkland, but it was also created to commemorate the lives of people that have died in Chicago and Baltimore and Aurora and Las Vegas and Los Angeles and Newtown and so many other cities. I can't even list them all. And people like Martin Luther King, who lost his life to a bullet. It represents the past, and the present is coming together to create a better future. And actually, a couple weeks after the shooting, people from Chicago, they're called the Peace Warriors, they came down to Parkland and talked to us, and they taught us MLK's peace principles. And I actually keep peace principle number 6 on my keychain, and it's the universe is on the side of justice. All right. And so that's always a constant remembrance. And the two people from the Peace Warriors actually spoke at the march. Their names are D'Angelo McDade and Alex King, and they did an incredible job. So basically, my friends and I are going to keep up this fight for as long as we have to, because there's injustice on our streets, and young people have changed the world in the past, and we're going to do it again.
And as Jesus was entering, he said, "Bring me a coat, not an old horse, but bring me a new horse. Bring me a young horse." And indeed, the movement moves forward, and the Lord is inspiring our young people to lead us forward. We prepare now to enter into the segment of our march. Our young people will lead us with a special presentation, March for Humanity, in honor of Martin Luther King. Mrs. Connie Smith Lindsay is the writer and creator and director. And I'm going to call the names. As I prepare to do that, just let me give you some instructions. The young people will lead us out. We ask that the general public follow them out first, followed by the guests in the reserved seats. You will be led out by members or representatives of the National Park Service. We bring now Miss Brandis Brown, Mr. Mateo Chanson, Miss Jasmine Guy, Miss Nadira Herbert B.A., Mr. Ken Kyler, Mr. Royce Mann, Miss Jamila McQueen, Miss Jasmine Mitchell, Mr. Malachi Robinson, Miss Kaylin Tate, Mr. Jaron Williams, Miss Timberly Williams. March for Humanity in honor of Martin.
Now we're going to march again, and we've got to march again in order to put the issue up where it is supposed to be and force everybody to see that there are 1,300 of God's children, sometimes going hungry, going through dark and dreary nights, wondering how this thing is going to come out. That's the issue. And we've got to say to the nation, we know how it's coming out. But when people get caught up with that which is right, and they are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory. We aren't going to let any mace stop us. We are masters in our nonviolence movement in disarming police force. They don't know what to do. I've seen them so often. I remember in Birmingham, Alabama, when we were in that majestic struggle there, we would move out of 16th Street Baptist Church day after day, and by the hundreds we would move out, and Bull Connor would tell them to send the dogs forth, and they did come. But we just went before the dogs singing, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking and keep on talking and marching to the freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking and keep on talking and marching to the freedom land. We march for humanity in honor of Martin. He was only 39 years old. Martin, MLK, Baptist preacher, civil rights activist, Nobel Peace Prize, native son of Georgia, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a global citizen, killed by an assassin 50 years ago. April 4th, 1968. April 9th, 1968. 50 years later, Dr. King marched, they marched, we marched for humanity. Yet with a steady beat, have-nots our weary feet come to where our fathers sighed. Can't you hear their feet? They walked, carpooled, taxied, and marched to boycott the buses in Montgomery. Can't you see her? Rosa Parks sat down. The people stood up and marched for change.
They launched the Montgomery bus boycott on December 5th, 1955. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as a civil rights leader. Their faith was vindicated. On December 20th, 1956, they organized a mass meeting to announce the bus integration. God heard their prayers as they treaded through the water. To an overflow crowd at the St. John AME Church, Dr. King read the following message. These 12 months have not been at all easy. Our feet have often been tired. We have struggled against tremendous odds to maintain alternative transportation. There have been moments when roaring waters of disappointment poured upon us in staggering torrents. We can remember days when unfavorable court decisions came upon us like tidal waves, leaving us treading in the deep and confused waters of despair. But
amid all this, we kept going with the faith that as we struggle, God struggles with us, and the arc of the moral universe, although long, is bending towards justice. And we kept living under the agony and darkness of Good Friday with the hope that one day,
when the glory comes, it will be yours, it will be yours, oh, one day.
the heightening glow of Easter would emerge on the horizon. We see truth crushed, crucified, and goodness buried. But we have kept going with a conviction that truth crushed to the earth will rise again.
Rise like the day, and we'll rise up. We'll rise unafraid, and we'll rise up. Dr. King marched, they marched, we marched for humanity.
In the effort to bring, In the effort to register black voters in the South, protesters marched 54 miles from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery. On March 9, 1965, protesters were confronted with deadly violence from local authorities and white vigilant groups. Right. Protesters walked around the clock for 3 days.
3 dangerous days we shall rise. To reach Montgomery, Dr. King, participation raised awareness to the difficulties of that black voters face and the need for a national Voting Rights Act. Can't you hear the feet of Dr. King on the hot pavement? The freedom fighters and the 8-year-old Cheyenne Webb Christberg crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the Selma to Montgomery March.
Tear gas in their eyes, Alabama police clubs and vicious dogs. That was Bloody Sunday. She marched, they marched, black and white together. We marched for humanity.
In solitary confinement in a small jail cell, Dr. King wrote on the margins of the newspaper a letter from Birmingham jail on April 16, 1963. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have never yet engaged in a direct action movement that was well-timed, according to the timetables of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation.
Make it plain, Pastor.
For years now, I've heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with a piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too delayed is justice denied.
They march, we march for humanity. Can't you hear the feet of the 250,000 peaceful protesters at the March on Washington? As Dr. King delivered the I Have a Dream speech on August 28th, 1963.
I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
Come on.
I have a dream that one day,
when the glory comes, it will be yours. It will be yours.
this nation will rise up.
Rise up, rise like the day, and we'll rise up.
And live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men
and women
are created equal.
On February 4th, 1968, the Reverend Dr. King preached a message for his congregation about the drum major instincts from this pulpit. He acknowledged that many people desired recognition. They desired to be the first. He called that desire the drum major instinct. But Reverend King preached that Sunday morning that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. Dr. King marched, they marched, we marched for humanity.
In his final moment, I bend to the mountaintop on April 3rd, 1968. In the Charles Mason Temple, Church of God in Christ, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered words that should inspire us to march for humanity.
Right now.
If we protest courageously, and yet with dignity and Christian love, when the history books are written in the future, somebody will have to say, there lived a race of people, of black people, of people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights. And thereby they injected a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization.
If something in the human rights revolution, if something isn't done and done in a hurry to bring the colored peoples of the world out of their long years of poverty,
tell them about it.
Their long years of hurt and neglect,
tell them about it.
The whole world is doomed.
Right now.
Now I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period, to see what is unfolding.
Right now.
And I'm happy that He's allowed me to be in Memphis.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for His life.
Dr. King's voice resonates through our blood. His Spirit is with us.
All right now.
And now, let the trumpet sound. And the bells ring. With love for humanity.
Love for humanity.
for humanity. Let us rise.
Rise up, rise unafraid.
From these pews in this hallowed place of remembrance, go beyond the stained glass window, depicting Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. We join you in this march for humanity, from Ebenezer Baptist Church to the Georgia State Capitol at Liberty Plaza.
We commit ourselves to the noble struggle for equal rights.
Amen.
And we keep marching until there is no more senseless gun violence in our schools, our churches, our neighborhoods, and our homes.
Just as student activists would emerge during the sit-in movements in the 60s, we hear Dr. King's words moving our generation to keep marching. We are committed to achieve freedom and human dignity, no matter the cost.
No matter the cost.
Dr. King paid the ultimate cost. Never before in the United States had so large body of students to spread the struggle over so great an area of pursuit of the goal of human dignity and freedom.
Amen.
The student movement finally refuted the idea that the Negro was content with segregation. The students had taken the struggle for justice into their own hands. Negro freedom fighters revealed to the nation and the world their determination and courage. All people deprived of dignity and freedom marched on every continent throughout the world.
Amen.
No matter the cost, we stand together, black and white, Jew and Gentile, Protestant and Catholic, young and old activists, to march for humanity. We are the peacemakers and drum majors for justice. If you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all the other shallow things will not matter. We stand on Dr. King's shoulders today to end the triple evils of poverty, racism, and war. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. We're gonna keep on walking and keep on talking and marching to the freedom land. In this march for humanity,
No justice, no peace.
Dr. King's legacy and sacrifices compel us.
Your streets, our streets.
To march and even protest. Until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let us rise, let us rise, let us rise. And we'll rise up, rise like the day, and we'll rise up, we'll rise unafraid, we'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again.
You guys are watching this coverage of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, commemorating the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral there at that church. That was his home church, and it looks like that was sort of a performance-style conclusion to the commemorative service. So we'll keep it here for just a second and then take you back over to Capitol Hill, where we have some other stuff that we're awaiting here in Washington.
All of our general public beyond the reserve section, you can prepare to leave. As you do that, let me please recognize the First Lady of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, Lady Ule Warnock. Amen. You'll see the Park Service representatives. If you are behind the Park Service representatives, if you will please make your way out now, as we are now lining up to begin the march. We are a tad behind, so we must march fast.
And his eloquent and generous introduction, and then thought about myself. I wondered who he was talking about.
Well, it seems like that just about does conclude the service there at the historical Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Now, it was quite interesting to see the student from Parkland who was up there. Now, the blonde young woman who spoke briefly with Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter, Yolanda. Yolanda was actually at the March for Our Lives on March 24th, that Saturday that we covered the march in downtown D.C. with all the students. They said upwards of 250,000 or so marching on Washington to combat or encourage Congress to start combating and proposing legislation to combat gun violence. And she was up there on stage with his granddaughter, so that was quite interesting to see her speak and reference that march. We covered that whole thing from soup to nuts from the beginning to the end, so if you missed that and you do want to check out that coverage, you can come to our YouTube channel, the main page, and check it out on our stream from March 24th. We definitely were here for many, many hours inside the newsroom, flashing it out to reporters in the field and getting in as much as we could of that whole event for you. But kind of interesting to see both of those things come together, really, as we kind of peep into a little inside look into this gorgeous historical church down in Atlanta to commemorate MLK 50 years. So he died on April 4th. Today was actually the anniversary of his funeral, so that's why we have this live coming in. We'll bring you back inside the newsroom for just a moment, guys. I want to briefly check in with you over on Capitol Hill. We're awaiting Senator Bill Nelson of Florida. He is speaking. Here's the camera here, live Capitol Hill look. Waiting for him to come out. When we do have that live, we'll listen in to see what he has to say. But for now, let's go over to some of the top stories of today, starting with that Facebook data sharing story. We've been talking about it for the morning. We're going to be talking about it for a couple days now because Mark Zuckerberg is here to testify on the Hill in a couple of days. But that story will start out a string of kind of top stories that we've been looking at this morning. So check out some of our top stories of the day, and then we'll show you some more live stuff that's coming in.
Facebook users will soon find out if they were a victim of the data sharing scandal. Starting today, Facebook will notify the 87 million users worldwide who had their data shared with Cambridge Analytica. The social media site will post a message on all news feeds about how to protect their information. And those who were part of the breach will get a more detailed message. Facebook faces mounting criticism from both the public and politicians.
The privacy issue and what I call the propagandist issue are both too big for Facebook to fix.
Cambridge Analytica reportedly misused data from millions of profiles. The firm allegedly improperly accessed users' information to build profiles on voters that were later used to help elect President Trump in 2016. Facebook executives have been in damage control mode since the news broke. But will the scandal reach the White House?
We're waiting on Congress. Let's see what comes out of that before the administration takes any particular action.
Just to demonstrate how widespread the breach was, 87 million is roughly the combined populations of New York, Texas, and California. And Mark Zuckerberg will have to answer questions about that massive leak when he goes before Congress in New York. Kelly Wright, Fox News.
Still some mystery this morning as to who launched a missile attack on Syria overnight. Both Syria and Russia are blaming Israel, but after what appears to have been a chemical weapons attack over the weekend, this may be just the start. These images really seem to have gotten the attention of the president over the weekend. Reports from Syria say there has been another use of chemical weapons, with children among the victims. In an unusual move, the president even called out Russian President Vladimir Putin by name, tweeting, "President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing Animal Assad. Big price to pay." And the president's Homeland Security advisor says the administration is still working out a response.
Yeah, I wouldn't take anything off the table. These are horrible photos. We're looking into the attack at this point.
The last time this happened, a year ago, President Trump launched a barrage of missiles in response. Since then, he has questioned the wisdom of an open-ended commitment of U.S. troops in Syria. But this recent attack could change everything.
If it becomes a tweet without meaning, then he's hurt himself in North Korea. If he doesn't follow through and live up to that tweet, he's going to look weak in the eyes of Russia and Iran. So this is a defining moment, Mr. President. You need to follow through with that tweet.
And we'll see what that follow-through includes. Meantime, the UN Security Council will meet later today in an emergency session to discuss what's happening in Syria. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
With the stroke of a brush and the swing of a hammer, Manuel Oliver works to honor his son, whom he lovingly referred to as Guac. His name was Joaquin, and he was one of 17 people who died at Stoneman Douglas High School on Valentine's Day.
That Joaquin is still out there with a loud voice fighting for his rights. Now, he's not marching for his life.
Starting with just a blank slate, Oliver used his heavy heart to turn the mural into a labor of love, giving a voice to his son, who he says was his best friend.
This is my son, actually the day I dropped him at school. And let me tell you something. My kid got shot on Valentine's Day. He was carrying flowers for his girlfriend when I dropped him at school. He was going to call me back after to tell me how that happened. How was it giving her the flowers? That call I never got, but it got with me, made by Joaquin's girlfriend, the flowers from that day.
The only reason we are here and I'm trying to stand here is because we have to stop seeing these situations. We have to. We have to have common sense.
Personal notes and messages of support became part of the mural. One in particular came from outspoken activist David Hogg, one of Joaquin's classmates in Florida.
We're really trying to find hope out of such a tragedy where we're trying to change America for the better to save people's lives, and that's really what we're trying to do. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, we're all Americans, and we need to work together to save lives.
And though Joaquin Oliver can no longer speak for himself, he is now one of many faces of a movement sweeping all across the country.
We're going to be Joaquin's parents forever, till the day that we cannot be here anymore.
Now, this mural is all part of the Parkland 17 exhibit, which was organized by NBA player Dwayne Wade of the Miami Heat. It turns out that Oliver was such a big fan of both the Heat and Dwayne Wade, he was actually buried in his basketball jersey. Reporting in downtown LA, Bill Malugin, Fox 11 News.
Take a seat anywhere.
I think that they're really hitting the niche with the idea of honoring law enforcement, honoring the military. That's really cool in a town like Colorado Springs.
Marcus is a brass regular, and he comes here to say thanks.
It's such a hard job, and we're all dependent upon what they do. We need to express that thanks. It's cool that this place honors that.
And it doesn't hurt that the beer's pretty good, too.
The beers are excellent.
Cheers, you guys.
This is an awesome beer. This Popo Session Pale Ale.
Woody Briggs opened Brass Brewing in late March.
I felt a tie and felt a love for not just the history of it, but also just what military gives to the community.
I am very, very proud to be a child of the military.
Well, I think it's very important to kind of honor that inside of here.
Each month, a portion of their sales will go to a local nonprofit that benefits either the military or law enforcement.
Well, this month we're using Mount Carmel Vet Center.
These are the people that are coming in and drinking our beer. Why should I send my money up? I want to keep it right here.
Stinson Beach was technically closed Sunday, but that didn't stop people from trying to have a picnic.
We have some, whatever this is called, what's it called? Capri Sun, because you have to say that healthy, you know? We got soda.
We run ceviche, all homemade stuff. We're not from out here.
They just didn't know what was waiting for them beyond the gate. Water completely covered the parking lot and picnic areas.
It's cold out here. Our toes are frozen in there. We just want to go to the real water.
Since the family and friends drove up from Bay Points, they were determined to have this picnic.
We were just hoping to have a fun time, but this is a little bit more than fun, I guess you could say.
It's different.
It's quite the experience.
Getting to the actual beach on foot is not exactly easy. However, we found plenty of people willing to do it.
Hoping no one falls in the hole.
The north parking lot collapsed. Determined beachgoers had to climb down what they were calling a little Niagara Falls to access the beach. Regardless of flood damage, it was a busy weekend at Stinson Beach. But with the parking spaces flooded, trying to find any place to park was a challenge.
Probably 20 minutes going back in the big loop around and around, hoping somebody will move, because that's pretty much going to be our only choice.
A lot of work to finally sit and relax on the beach, but these visitors say the trip was worth the effort. At Stinson Beach, Lee Martinez, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
I said it was bedlam in there. It was the scariest thing I've ever experienced.
Chaos at the Florida Mall.
I just heard popping and everyone was running, so I just joined the wave.
Maxine Retzky saying those pops sounded like gunshots.
Pretty scary.
She and her son running as fast as they could into the closest store seeking cover, thinking there was an active shooter.
We ran into a store and hid in like a storage room and put things against the door so that no one could get in.
Like held my foot in front of the door. And
police, fire, and medical crews swarming the mall. On scene, deputies determining there was no gunman, but there was a robbery. Police say the suspects used firecrackers to create a distraction, rushing into Mayors, grabbing jewelry, while people like the Retzkys ran for their lives. 11 people injured in the mayhem. Orange County Fire Rescue rushing 5 to area hospitals, treating 6 on scene.
Amazing grace.
Families of the victims of the fatal bus crash in Western Canada are seeing a tremendous outpouring of support.
We will get through this together.
Hundreds gathered Sunday in the small town of Humboldt for a vigil to honor the victims at the arena where the Broncos play, including Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and multiple former NHL players.
And in the midst of this, we have leaned into the strength of many to help us find our way through this darkness.
On Friday, a semi-truck slammed into the bus carrying the junior hockey team. A total of 29 passengers, including the driver, were on the bus during the violent crash that happened when junior hockey players were heading to a playoff game in northeastern Saskatchewan. Among the dead, the captain of the Humboldt Broncos team, the head coach, and a radio announcer.
The Humboldt Broncos were about not building hockey players, but creating amazing young men. And that's what we had in our organization, was amazing young men.
Police say the truck driver was initially detained, but has been released and provided with mental health assistance. The cause of the crash is still unknown, but an investigation is underway. In New York, Kelly Wright, Fox News.
It was nearly 10 months ago a jury failed to reach a verdict in Bill Cosby's first case. This time around, it may be the same defendant and the same courtroom, but experts say it will be far from the same trial.
Thank you.
Comedian Bill Cosby is once again in the spotlight, accused of drugging and sexually molesting Andrea Constand at his Philadelphia area home in 2004. Last June, a judge declared a mistrial after the jury deadlocked on all 3 counts. Today, the retrial begins, with 12 new jurors hearing the case.
We will want them to erase everything that they heard outside this courtroom.
This trial's jurors have the same racial and gender makeup as the first. 10 are white, 2 are black, 7 are men, 5 are women. But this time around, the jury will hear more testimony. The judges ruled prosecutors can call up to 5 additional accusers to the witness stand, including model Janice Dickinson. All of the accusers were allegedly assaulted by Cosby, but their claims are too old to charge.
They're able to broaden the scope of the case from what was really a he said, she said, into a referendum on his treatment of women over decades.
Cosby also has a brand new legal team who has promised to paint the accusers as liars looking for money.
We're going to see more witnesses testifying against Cosby, but also a more aggressive response to those allegations.
Then there's the Me Too movement. Cosby's trial ended before sexual allegations were brought against other Hollywood A-listers. Experts say the cause could affect how jurors see the case. By the way, Cosby has pleaded not guilty. In Norristown, Pennsylvania, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
So that was Lauren Blanchard in Norristown, Pennsylvania. That's a suburb of Philadelphia where the Cosby trial is continuing today. By the way, speaking of that, there was this morning a topless woman protester with the words "Women's Lives Matters" written on her body in red ink. She was apprehended by security detail as she tried to sort of lunge at Bill Cosby and his lawyer as they were walking into the courthouse for the start of this sexual assault retrial. So we're going to keep our eye on that and see what becomes of that. But meanwhile, guys, we're waiting on Senator Bill Nelson. This is still a look in Capitol Hill. He's going to be speaking at the arrival of Mark Zuckerberg, where we just saw him. So we'll be speaking about that and possibly to him. I'm not quite sure, but we know that that is the setup there, and they are ready for that to happen. So we're awaiting Senator Nelson on Capitol Hill. But meanwhile, speaking of Florida, this morning, Governor Rick Scott of Florida announced his bid for a run for Senate. He will try to unseat Senator Bill Nelson, and he had some words for the media, for the public this morning in this announcement. This just happened a few hours ago. Check it out.
Do I live the next senator for the great state of Florida, Rick Scott?
Thank you very much. Well, first I want to thank everybody for being here. This is a unbelievable day for Anime. I want to thank Luis for being here. This is a great state. This is the melting pot of the world. And this state showed up, and we helped Puerto Ricans that came here because the problems that happened after Maria, and we showed up in Puerto Rico. And we do that in this state. So thank God there's individuals like Luis that cares so much about their island. And thank God there's so many Puerto Ricans that have come here and lived the dream of this country. And we're going to continue to be the best friend in the world for Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico and in the United States. I want to thank Isaac. I want to thank Isaac for putting this together and allowing us to be here today. And I want to just congratulate Isaac and his family and everybody at ODC for what they've done. They are living the dream of this country. The dream of this country is you can start from anywhere. It doesn't matter what zip code you came from. You can do anything in this country. There's so many businesses like Isaac's that are prospering because of what we've done over the last 7 years to make this the place that business can succeed better than anywhere in the world. You heard what Isaac said. They've grown their number of employees, which is very important to me, especially if you run on a jobs platform. They've got offices around the state. So let's give a big round of applause to Isaac, his family, his partners, and everybody here. Congratulations, buddy. So next I want to thank my wife. 8 years ago on this date, I announced that we would run for governor and first lady. And she was probably the only person that really had a belief that I could win. You know, I'd never been involved in politics before, but she stood by me forever. We met in high school. We got married when we were 19 years old, and we've lived the dream of this country, to get to build businesses and live in the most beautiful place in the United States. So I want to give a big round of applause and thank my wonderful wife, Anne. So 8 years ago today, I announced I was going to run for governor. What did the naysayers and the critics immediately say? A business guy with no background in government has no chance to run this state. There's no chance they can turn this state around. I ran on a campaign of 700,000 jobs over 7 years, and why? This state had lost over 800,000 jobs in 4 years. We still had this beautiful weather, but we increased regulations, we increased taxes on people in this state, but we stopped it. We've now, you, business people, job creators, have added 1.5 million jobs almost. The 4 years before I got elected, home prices dropped nearly 50%. What's happened? They've gone way up since then, in the last 7 years. Homes are being foreclosed upon. Over 40% of the homes are underwater on their mortgages the day I got elected. That's completely changed now. So let's think of what we've done in the last 7 years in this state. Almost 1.5 million jobs. $10 billion in tax reductions. Over $9 billion in debt reductions in this state. We've cut regulations. We've streamlined the permitting process. We've had over a 40% increase in tourism just in 7 years. We've outpaced the nation in job creation, outpaced the nation in labor force, outpaced the nation in GDP growth. People are flocking to Florida because this is where you can live the dream of this country. Over 300,000 people are moving to the state a year. That was not true between 2006 and 2010. People were leaving the state because you couldn't find a job, you're losing your house, and you might be losing your car. So now we've got to take that same mission to D.C. We've got to take that same can-do attitude that it doesn't matter what the naysayers say. It doesn't matter what the critics say. If you ignore them, think of what you can accomplish. So today, with my wife by my side, I'm announcing I am running for the U.S. Senate for the great state of Florida. Now, what's the first thing the naysayers are going to say? You can't fix Washington. One person out of 100 in the Senate, oh, you can't make any change. They told me that when I went to Tallahassee. And you told them. Yep. They told me that when I was in business. You couldn't succeed in business. We can. Now, we have to all acknowledge Washington's a disaster. It's dysfunctional. There's a lot of old tired thinking up there. It's not heading in the right direction. Now, here's what we shouldn't be doing. You know, we shouldn't be sending the same type of people to Washington. We should say, we're going to make change. But we can't sit here and say we're going to do the same thing and we're going to get a different result. I'm not accepting the same result. We can change Washington. We must change Washington. We will change Washington. Together, let's get Washington to work. In this campaign, I'm going to put out a variety of policy initiatives. And let's start with the obvious. This concept of career politicians has got to stop. We have to have term limits on Congress. We're not going to see a change in Washington if we don't have term limits on Congress. Think about it. If you travel this country, everybody around the country says, you know, we need term limits. There's one place they say we don't need them. Where's that? Florida. Washington, D.C. Because it's the career politicians there that don't want to lose their jobs. We have term limits in this state. We have in most states term limits for governor. We have term limits for president, which we should. Why don't we have it for Congress? The first thing they'll say is, oh, it can't be done. You can't get that done. Well, we've tried that. You can't get it done. We can't think that way. We've got to bring new ideas, fresh thinking, and we've got to change the direction of this country for our benefit, not for the benefit of career politicians in Washington, D.C. Now, here's one thing I learned in Tallahassee. If you go to Tallahassee and you make real change, guess what happens? The political insiders, the first thing they're mad at you. And they say, Governor, you just don't fit into Tallahassee. You know, I think that's true. You know, I didn't fit into Tallahassee because I didn't play the insider games. I never intended to fit into Tallahassee, and guess what? I'm not going to fit into Washington either. We need to shake up Washington. Think about it. We can't keep sending career politicians and politicians to Washington and think we're going to get a different result. We've got to not send talkers. Think about it. Think about it. When Isaac opens a business, he doesn't say, you know what, just give me a good speech there. I'll make you something. No, he says, what have you done in the past? Let's stop sending talkers to Washington. Let's send some doers to Washington. We're gonna send doers. We need to send doers to Washington to get to work for us. We're tired of Washington working for them. They need to start working for us, and they're going to. Now, as you know, I ran in 2010, and the first thing people said, well, why do you care so much about jobs? Because all you do is you talk about jobs. 700,000 jobs in 7 years. It's all you do. And since I got elected, they say, all you talk about is jobs. I'll tell you why it's important. I grew up in a family that struggled for money. I watched parents struggle to put food on the table. I watched a dad that lost his car. How do you think his face looked that day? That was going on all across the state in 2010. I grew up in public housing. I don't even know my natural dad. I had a wonderful adopted father that had a sixth grade education that had a struggle to put food on the table and get a job. But as you saw in the campaign ads in 2010, I had a wonderful mom. She worked her butt off. She had a lot of jobs, and she said, you live in the greatest country in the world. There is no limitation. Because of where you live, there is absolutely no limitation. You can accomplish anything. She said, the deck's stacked against you, but you know what? You can accomplish it here. And I said, you're right. The deck might have been stacked against me growing up, but guess what?
Guys, we'll take a quick pause on Rick Scott's announcement for his run for Senate, because the person he is seeking to unseat, actually Bill Nelson, is speaking right now. Bill Nelson will be one of the first lawmakers that Mark Zuckerberg was to meet with today on Capitol Hill, and here he is live. Take a look.
I think the message I wanted to convey to him, that if we don't rein in the misuse of social media, none of us are going to have any privacy anymore. We've seen that enormously affected already as a result of this. We openly talked about the Russians and their use of social media in the last election. I tried to convey to him what could be done using social media in the future, but I also tried to point out to him that adversaries such as Vladimir Putin, they can't beat us militarily but they can beat us through cyber. And on a going forward basis. So I would just sum up our meeting by saying, if we don't watch out with social media and platforms like Facebook and the mistakes that they made in the past, then no American is going to have any privacy anymore.
Senator Nelson, you talked about the question here of privacy. In his statement that he submitted already to the House Committee for Wednesday, he talks about that they're putting in security provisions at financial risk to Facebook. But at the end of the day, this doesn't have anything to do with Facebook. Isn't the horse out of the barn already? That this can't be brought back, reined back in, as you suggest?
We talked about that, but the fact is we have to ensure the privacy of people. Now, ultimately, as I said to him, your business model that allows advertisers to get information and then directly tailor that advertising. There's a question of privacy there, and that's going to have to be decided at some point in the future. I gave him the example. If I am on Facebook and communicating with friends that I like chocolate, do they know of a good chocolate shop, and suddenly I have an advertisement pop up on chocolates? Is that an invasion of my privacy? I think that's a real question. But of course, the question, and that's their business model. But the question really for me today is our overall privacy in the hands of somebody that wants to do us harm. And we have seen that done in this case.
Senator Nelson,
Yes,
did you ask him why Facebook kept quiet about this data incursion for so long?
He affirmatively says that in 2013, and then that was revised to 2014, that took effect in 2015, that they went to, so there's the profile test that is done by Cambridge Analytica, and then all of the friends of that one of 270,000 people, all of their friends' personal information gets sucked out of that friend. I said, when did that get protected? He says it is protected, but it was in 2015.
But did he say why Facebook never told anyone about this?
He did not. That will be a question.
Senator Nelson, did the issue of regulations come up at all in your meeting? And do you think that he takes it seriously now? What was your feeling?
My sense is that he takes it seriously because he knows that there is going to be a hard look at regulation. If it's not his site, someone else can be misused for people who are trying to do us harm. And I believe he understands that regulation could be right around the corner.
Do you think Facebook should be regulated?
Say again?
Do you think Facebook should be regulated?
Well, if it's going to undermine ultimately our democratic institutions, we're going to have to do something to protect ourselves.
Senator Nelson, you have a Facebook page. Do you feel that your data is safe and protected?
I am very careful. My Facebook page is not a personal one. Mine is the Senate Facebook page and the campaign Facebook page, and we are very careful about what goes on there.
Senator, two questions. First and foremost, do you get the feeling from Mr. Zuckerberg that he's taking action to protect democratic institutions ahead of the midterm elections? And a follow-up, what is the timetable for what type of regulations we could see for big tech companies this year?
I don't know the answer to your second question, but the first question is, I think he thinks he's taking action and has in the past, but I think there's going to be a lot more action he's going to have to take in the future.
Did you talk about any specific action that needs to be taken immediately with the help of Congress to implement it?
Yes, I clearly explained to him what I thought had happened in the misuse of personal data. Number one, that those 87 million, which he confirmed, that personal data was sent into hands that he said they were lied to by Cambridge Analytica. Well, you can't protect our privacy just on the basis of somebody telling you that they're going to protect it. So does that mean law? Yes. Does that mean regulation? Yes.
Senator Nelson,
Yes.
Governor Rick Scott just announced his candidacy for Senate. Some say this is going to be your greatest challenge yet. How are you feeling about the state of the race?
Well, I don't care who is an opponent. I always take them seriously, and I run like there's no tomorrow. And I think in this case, a lot of the differences between the two of us are going to come out in the course of the campaign. So that's what I'd say at this point.
Senator, back onto the topic of Facebook, the issues that you raised with privacy and regulation affect more than just Facebook. Would you like to see the executives from Google and Twitter and other tech companies come testify?
Absolutely, because it's not just Facebook. He happens to be the point of the spear. But all these other app sites that get your personal data, that's another way of us losing our privacy. Individual privacy for Americans has been a value a characteristic that we highly value. And if we don't watch out, we won't have any of that privacy left anymore.
What do you think of this argument, Senator?
What
do you think of this argument? What do you think about Facebook's argument that the company was simply too idealistic, and that's how it missed all of this?
There's possibly some of that. When he said to me very forthrightly, we were lied to, and we should have caught that. I believe that, but I think in today's world that's naive.
This is a big, sophisticated company.
I know, and I think we have just seen one of the openings in the door to taking away our privacy.
Do you feel satisfied that Americans are going to be protected in the midterm elections by Facebook with their data?
To be determined.
Senator, they're only a couple months away, though.
Sorry, Senator, during your meeting, President Trump held a cabinet meeting saying he was going to announce in the next 24 to 48 hours his decision on what he wants to do with the Syria attack over the weekend. I just was curious your response to this weekend's incident, and also what action would you like to see President Trump take?
Well, consider me a hardliner. I thought that President Obama, when he set the red line and then they attacked with chemical weapons, that the United States should have taken action then, and I do so now as well.
What kind of action would you be okay with, sir?
Well, there are a range of options, but Israel has already chosen some of those options.
Do you think there has to be a new AUMF?
Let me give somebody else a chance who hadn't had a question.
Senator back here, what changes
Okay,
would you like
yes.
to see?
Let me get her and then I'll get you.
What changes would you like to see at the FTC to better regulate Facebook? What specifically?
Well, I think part of the problem is the FTC is not the only regulator, and that some of these regulations ought to be done by the FCC, which is invested with the power to regulate telecommunications. And of course, that's the big fight right now over who has that on this new platform of social media, since we're gone from the old days of the copper wire and the telephone.
Senator,
somebody over
do you
here.
believe that Zuckerberg is still fit to lead the company?
I'm not in a position to answer that, but I can just tell you we had a heart-to-heart discussion, and by the way, it was not with his people. I invited him personally. It was one-on-one with no staff for over an hour. And my opinion, my personal opinion of him was that he was forthright and honest to the degree that he could. But I think there are going to be a lot of challenges for his company in the future.
Senator, on the issue of regulation, why should the American people think the federal government has any better idea how to keep people's data safe than a company that does this for a living?
Because our data has not been kept private.
Senator, why is this? Been apologizing about this since 2011 or since 2007.
Say again.
He's been apologizing about these kinds of things and promising to do better since 2007.
I can't
what
answer
specifically
that.
in this hearing did he say that made you change tack? Or that like he would actually come through
I
this
didn't
time?
say I changed tack.
No. Him changing it. Like what? Like,
no, I gave you my impression of him.
Why do you think he'll do better than he has in the past, though? Because this is like a pattern.
I don't understand your question. What's your
Senator,
question?
we've
had consumer privacy scandals with major U.S. companies in the past, Equifax, Target, Google, others, the list goes on and on. Every time Congress seems to trot out their CEOs here, ask them a lot of questions, and then ultimately do nothing. Why is this time going to be any different?
Because if we don't do something now, none of us will have any privacy anymore.
Are you confident Congress will actually move forward in the near term to do something about these issues?
Not under this administration.
Senator, I want to clarify. Do you think that Facebook and other social media platforms should think about limiting the sale of campaign ads, the ability for campaigns and outside groups to buy political advertisements on their
We
sites?
talked about that at length. And my understanding is that they have a three-pronged effort now to try to go out and determine who are the fake sites that would be generating fake news, and then on sites that appear to be legitimate, to check the veracity through third parties checking the veracity of the message. Now, is that going to be enough? I don't know the answer to that, but we better start asking that question.
Senator,
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
believe that Mark Zuckerberg and the company were lied to?
Well, he said, in his opinion, that they were lied to. I don't know what the conversations were, but he said we were lied to by Cambridge Analytica.
Are you confident that they won't be lied to again by another vendor?
Well, of course, I stressed that point to him. What are the safeguards that you're putting in? And I just mentioned two that he had mentioned to me.
What did you learn today that helps you set up the hearing for tomorrow? What did you learn today that
How in the world can you have 44 senators do a hearing that has a lot of substance when each senator has only 4 minutes? I was an objector to being a combined hearing. It ought to have been a Commerce Committee hearing and Judiciary, where each committee could operate in its own way. It doesn't seem to me it's going to be a format that you're going to get a lot of substance, because the 4 minutes have run out and you've got to move on.
Senator, do you think that the appetite for regulation for tech companies here on Capitol Hill is bipartisan? Facebook supports the Honest Ads Act now, but truthfully only one Republican has signed on to it. How is this going to become a bipartisan thing, or will it become a
Now,
bipartisan
run
thing?
that by me again. I didn't quite
Do you
understand.
think that the appetite for regulation of tech companies is bipartisan, or is it driven by Democrats?
The appetite of
For Capitol Hill to regulate these tech companies?
Oh, well, right now, I think it's going to be very difficult. That's why when I was asked the question, do I think anything's going to get done? And I said, not during this administration.
What would you like to see President Trump do, if anything, with regards to regulations of big tech companies?
Well, first of all, I'd like for Robert Mueller to be able to issue his report unimpeded. Let's see to what degree these social media were in fact used and how close it comes. And once we know that, then we'll know a lot better about how to go forward.
Did the Mueller investigation come up in your meeting with Mark Zuckerberg?
I brought it up.
Has he met with the Mueller probe?
I don't know that. All right. What lady wants to be the cleanup hitter? Anybody? It's hard to see you. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
So that's Senator Bill Nelson, Democrat from Florida, who was one of the first lawmakers to meet with Mark Zuckerberg upon Zuckerberg's arrival on the Hill. Now, we know Mark Zuckerberg will be testifying before the House and the Senate on Wednesday, and it sounds like Senator Nelson isn't too happy with how the format is set up for that meeting, with 4 minutes for each person, saying not enough time to really flesh out what they really want to get from him. But again, he was one of the first lawmakers to meet with Zuckerberg today, and that just happened behind closed doors. And then they got Senator Nelson there in front of the camera. Senator Nelson is also the top Democrat on the Senate Commerce Committee, which he also mentioned there in that interview. Let's flash it down now, guys, to a live press conference going on in El Paso, Texas right now. It's a border control press conference. Updates on what's going down on the border down in El Paso.
For example, those claiming fear of return to their home country are often scheduled for immigration court hearings at distant future dates, and they rarely appear for them. This dynamic is exploited by those on the south side, by their smugglers, who are aware of this, and it undermines even the most determined law enforcement efforts. So to answer your question in a sentence, yes, it's part of a comprehensive package that includes technology, detection, and consequence for those who try to enter our country illegally. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and joining us today.
All right, look, guys, looks like we just got a little snippet of that press conference. We'll see if we can re-rack and play some of that out. Again, more detail on the construction on the U.S.-Mexican border down in El Paso, and updates from Border Patrol agents who are down there to do this, be part of this construction, and answer questions about how it's going. While we look for that video and kind of keep our eyes out for anything else that's happening on Capitol Hill, let's go back over to Governor Rick Scott's announcement that he wants to run for Senate, and he'll be looking to unseat Senator Nelson, whom we just saw speak on Capitol Hill.
In the world, there is no limitation because of where you live. There is absolutely no limitation. You can accomplish anything. She said the deck stacked against you, but you know what? You can accomplish it here. And I said, you're right. The deck might have been stacked against me growing up, but guess what? I had two things going for me. My mom. She was wonderful. She worked her tail off. She said, work your butt off and anything is possible in this country. And the other one is I grew up in this country. In this country, everything is supposed to be accomplishable. There should be no limitations on what you want to accomplish. It shouldn't matter where you start in this country. Everybody has a shot at the dream of this country. And I tell people, even though I grew up poor, I actually believe I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth because of this country. Because the choices and the opportunities that I had to make in this country that you couldn't make in any other country. You know, it seems to be fashionable now to attack and badmouth this country. I'm sick of it. I've had the opportunity to travel around. There is no place like America. And we need to thank God every day for this country and our opportunity to be here. So, thank you for joining the fight. Thank you for being here. I'm going to say Spanish after I finish this, but let's get to work. Yo aspiré a gobernar.
I bet it was.
So that was Florida Governor Rick Scott announcing his run this morning. That was just a few moments ago, really a few hours ago, down there in Florida. Obviously, we've seen him after all the devastation in Florida and Hurricane Harvey and all the like this year. So we've seen a lot of Governor Scott, and now he's in the public eye in another way, announcing his run for Senate. Guys, we're going to flash over back to D.C., to Southeast D.C. Let's take a look at the Eagle Cam. We have Mama Eagle Liberty waiting in the tree there, and the babies are growing up fast. So let's take a look, just to give you guys a vision of what it looks like. They are now able to be named. They're asking people to vote for the name of these two babies online on eaglecam.org, and you guys can do that too if you're interested. But take a look at them. We'll leave this with a little break right now, and then we'll come back with some more news. All right, guys, coming back in studio here for just a second. We'll show the Eagles a little bit later as they are hanging out there on the Anacostia, overlooking the river, growing up fast. I want to take you back to that Border Patrol news conference down in El Paso. This was a few moments ago. The officials held a news conference to talk about the proposed border wall and what it entails. And we have a little snippet from that, a little more than we just showed you at the end. So here's what we have from the end of that press conference.
Resources to pay for it, but we've been given resources by Congress through the President's support to construct this border wall. Okay, the project, like I said, is scheduled to begin today. Estimated completion date is March of next year. It's going to have a substantial benefit to us, and if you look at the capabilities that the deterrent provides, you can see a vehicle in the distance there. Without the deterrence capability provided by WALL, it takes more agents, it takes more technology, it takes more time to interdict illegal alien traffic. And we often chase the same traffic back and forth because we freely go back and forth to determine entrance until we get a chance to stop it. It makes us more effective. The National Guard support we were just talking about is going to help us focus our resources better as well. They're going to be providing administrative support, not providing any law enforcement assistance. We provide the law enforcement response. Oh, definitely. We continually adjust our operations to whatever is occurring in our area, and we are doing the same with the construction of this wall. Well, as I was talking about, this wall is necessary to help us secure this section of the United States border. We welcome lawful travelers, legitimate trade and commerce. We welcome that in the United States. Those entering between the ports of entry are not entering lawfully. Those on foot, the contraband that they're transporting, this is violating the laws of the United States. Our job here in Border Patrol between the ports of entry is to stop that. This border wall is going to help us do that. All right, you, sir, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, you've always referred to the wall of the man, and now the wall. How much of that has to do with
Well, I've worked in the Border Patrol in 4 sectors and up at headquarters, and I've heard physical barrier referred to by a lot of terms. The wall that we're putting in place is accurately described as a wall because it's a very serious structure. You're talking, like I said, 18 feet, 5-foot anti-climbing plate, concrete filled with rebar, 6 feet into the ground, another 2 feet of concrete underneath that. Sir, it's very much a wall, and we're going to use it to stop illegal entries. Well, we took a look at the prototypes from San Diego, but we're following, they're very similar. The wall that we're using in Annapolis, and y'all can go take a look at that, is the same wall that's going to be here. It works for us, and it's what we're going to put out.
Oh my God.
That's a good question, sir. The wall is a key part of our border security posture, but it's only one part. Our most valuable resource always has been, always will be our agents. But they can't do that job alone. We need the wall to help them. We need technology. We need detection capabilities. And we need to be able to provide consequence for those who would enter this country illegally. As long as people believe they can enter this country and be allowed to remain even though they're arrested by us, it's always going to serve as a pull factor for illegal immigration. Loopholes in the system, such as backlogs and other situations, are created for certain types of entrants. For example, those claiming fear of return to their home country are often scheduled for immigration court hearings at distant future dates, and they rarely appear for them. This dynamic is exploited by those on the south side, by their smugglers, who are aware of this, and it undermines even the most determined law enforcement efforts. So to answer your question in a sentence, yes, it's part of a comprehensive package that includes technology, detection, and consequence for those who try to enter our country illegally. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and joining us today.
All right, guys, looks like we only got really a small snippet of that border control press conference update, but it sounds like the wall is underway. They're getting underway with construction starting even today, and it's slated to be completed by next March, so about a year project, a little less than a year for them. I'm sure we'll have more of those live kind of conferences coming into us to find out more about it throughout the next month as we go on. Meanwhile, Capitol Hill, we're still keeping an eye out on any meetings post Mark Zuckerberg meetings. We're going to be definitely following his testimony coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday, tomorrow and the next day on Capitol Hill. He is here in full force and we'll be talking, and we're going to be listening to see what he has to say. It's very interesting stuff, I know, for a lot of us that are social media users and wondering about our data and our privacy and where everything is and who has what information on us. But until we go to our next thing, guys, I have a live video right now coming in. I'm not quite sure where this is, but it looks like there is a car crashed into some sort of barrier. I'm going to find out where this is, get you more information on it, but it is our live aerial feed right now. And again, not a lot of details there, but it looks like something important enough related to some sort of airline or airplane, some crash. We'll get that information to you. All right, guys, we're finding out this was some sort of car chase in Washington State that ended with the suspect there crashing into a gate. Looks like he's flying away now, so we don't have any more on that. We'll bring you the next thing that we have live coming up shortly, but we'll show you for now back to the Eagle Cam here in D.C. You all are watching Fox 5 Live inside the Fox 5 DC newsroom, where we're tracking all the local news and national news and news from around the world here for you to bring you the latest live coverage on everything, anything and everything that we have coming in. Today, obviously, the big talk of the town, Mark Zuckerberg in town to meet with lawmakers before he testifies before the House and the Senate on Wednesday. We also had some coverage of Rick Scott announcing his bid for Senate. Other things kind of popping up at us. We're talking about the Cosby retrial, anything that comes in from that, we will have for you as that continues on live. And also, it's the 50th anniversary of MLK's funeral. Earlier, we were inside that church, the Ebenezer Baptist Church down in Atlanta. Now, hundreds of people are marching through downtown Atlanta, marking the 50th anniversary of the funeral, and they're arriving at the Georgia State Capitol. There's a live camera down there, so let's take a look.
No. That's kind of an exception. Past. She's just very. Wait. Is in fact key where? Pastor Warner? I babysit for him once. Yeah, I babysit for him. Like, they're still next couple. She's right. They're right behind there.
All right. If Mark Aram is in the audience, would you please come on up to the podium? Mark Aram, please come up to... What's up, buddy? Come on up.
I see you.
Sir,
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Also, can we have Kim Fields come on up to the podium as well? Kim, if you're in the audience, come on up to the podium.
She's right here. She's good. She's coming.
Can we begin to have everyone get into their places so we can begin our program? If everyone can please get in places and find your seats so we can start our program. Right? All right, everyone. If we can please have everyone find their seats so we can begin our program. Please find your seats so we can begin our program.
So we can start now.
All right, everyone, if we can please begin our seats. We'd like to start with our drumline band, if we can, as we begin our festivities for this afternoon for MLK 50 Forward. I'm one of your hosts this afternoon, Frank Ski from the People Station V103. Can we get a round of applause for our ML King drumline today? All right. Can we please have everyone in the front? If you're standing in front of people seated, can you please move so that the family can have an unobstructed view? Thank you very much. We got to make sure our very distinguished guests that are here with us that have traveled far and near will have a clear view of our festivities this afternoon. Right now, I'd like to introduce the Spelman College Glee Club.
gonna trouble the water. Yeah, it works out.
Guys, we are looking at this feed here in Atlanta of the 50th anniversary of MLK's funeral. You can see Reverend Al Sharpton there in the crowd, and this is live streaming from our Atlanta station. We're taking this from them. Right now, I believe we have a little bit of sound on this, and they are going to be making some speeches and just kind of proceeding with the event. So we're going to put this up for you to enjoy. And I'm out of here for now. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But Sam is coming up next to host your next portion of Fox 5 Live.
National Historic Park, the Ford Motor Company, FedEx, Target, and Delta Airlines. So let's give all of our sponsors a gratitude with a round of applause. Let's get this started. Please welcome to our stage a Sandersville native. He began his career in public service working as a prosecutor, a judge, a state senator, and a U.S. congressman for Georgia's 9th District. He was elected Georgia's 82nd governor in 2010 and re-elected in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, please, the Honorable Nathan Deal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are in the presence of the statue of Dr. Martin Luther King, which we dedicated on these Capitol grounds last year. That was a great occasion. Almost 50 years, and I was honored to be the governor who participated in that process, and many of you did as well, and I congratulate you on it. It has been a great addition to the grounds here at our state capitol. Now, I know that many of you, as I, remember where you were 50 years ago. Now, we have a lot of young people here who were not around at that point in time. But that was one of those historic events that those of us who were around will remember. And it is in that spirit that we are here today. May the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King continue to reign here in our capital city and in our great state of Georgia. May it also reign throughout our great nation. His call for equality, his call for mercy, his call for love to overcome hate still resonates today. I think he would be proud of many of the accomplishments that have occurred since his death. I think those of us in Georgia can be proud of what we have been able to achieve here in his home state and in his hometown. We lead the nation in terms of meaningful criminal justice reform, which he certainly would have been in favor of that, and we are proud of our record in that regard. We're also proud of the accomplishments that we've made on many other fronts. So my challenge to you today is to continue in that spirit with which he led and for which he died. Welcome to the Capitol grounds of the great state of Georgia.
Thank you, Governor. At this time, I'd like to bring up my co-host from WSB TV, the one and only Mark Aram.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm sorry. My clock's a little upside down. I'm honored to be here. I'm grateful to be here. And I'm honored to introduce our next guest. Much like most of you in the audience, I'm proud to say I've got a mayor named Keisha. I call her 60 because she's the 60th mayor of Atlanta. She got her law degree here at Georgia State University. Please welcome Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Well, good afternoon. It is such an honor to be here today on behalf of the city of Atlanta, and an honor to be here as the mayor of the city of Atlanta. I know that I stand here today because of the dream that Dr. King had for my life. And I'm so very grateful that we are gathered here today as a beloved community. And although we are marking the anniversary of a very somber occasion, I think it fitting that today in the city of Atlanta, the dream lives on. And that dream lives on because in the city of Atlanta, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. So before coming over here today, I was joined by men in a prison reentry program in the city of Atlanta. Men who are transitioning from incarceration in the state of Georgia and will now be employed by the city of Atlanta in the Department of Watershed Management. And what's so remarkable about what we announced today is that when we think about Dr. King's life, it really would have been difficult to imagine a place where the mayor of the city of Atlanta, an African-American woman, would stand alongside a commissioner from the state of Georgia and announce a program for African-American men who are leaving prison. But this is what the dream has been about. It has been about us overcoming barriers. It has been about us building a community that will be lasting for the generations. And so thank you all for remembering the dream. Thank you all to so many of you all who created the dream. I am personally grateful, and on behalf of the city of Atlanta, my commitment is that the dream will never be forgotten. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mayor Bottoms. Before we get our next guest, we have a little musical interlude. May I present the Morris Brown Glee Club. For the record, Frank Ski called me Morris Brown. The Morehouse Glee Club, ladies and gentlemen.
In the Lord, in the Lord, my soul's been anchored in the My soul's been anchored. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored, anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. Hallelujah, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. Before I say in hell one day, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. I'd sing and pray myself away. My soul's been anchored in the My soul's been anchored in the Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored, anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. Hallelujah, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. Go shout and pray and never stop. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. Until I reach the mountaintop, my soul's been anchored in the My soul's been anchored. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored, anchored in the Lord, in the Lord, in the Lord. My soul's been anchored in the Lord, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. Hallelujah, my soul's been anchored in the Lord. Do you love him? Oh, yes. Do you love him? Hallelujah. Do you love him? Oh, yes. God Almighty. Are you anchored? Oh, yes. Yes, I'm anchored. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. Yes. Will you serve him? Will you serve him? Oh, yes. Will you serve him? Hallelujah. Will you serve him? Oh, yes. God Almighty. Are you anchored? Oh, yes. Yes, I'm anchored. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. Hallelujah. Will you praise him? Will you praise him? Yes. Will you praise him? Hallelujah. Will you praise him? Oh, yes. God Almighty. Yes, I'm anchored. Lord, I'm anchored. Oh, yes. Lord, I love you. Oh, yes. Yes, I'll serve you. Oh, yes. Lord, I praise you. Oh, yes. Hallelujah. My soul's been anchored in the Lord. God Almighty. My soul's been anchored in
Ladies and gentlemen, the Morehouse Glee Club. Morehouse. Our next speaker was elected to the Atlanta City Council in 1997 and is an active member of the National League of Cities. One of her legislative highlights is the instrumental role she played in July 2011, the pension reform for the city of Atlanta. She is credited by many for bringing the labor unions, pension boards, and employee groups together to agree on their increased contribution level to save their defined benefits and avoid costly legal action against the city. Please welcome to the stage Atlanta City Council President Felicia Moore.
Thank you so much for the honor and privilege of speaking to you today. My name is Felicia Moore, President of the Atlanta City Council, and want to bring greetings on behalf of the City Council of Atlanta. I did see Councilmember Matt Westmoreland in the audience. I'm not sure if other of my colleagues are here, but we want to make sure that we participate in this event. While this event marks 50 years from the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, it certainly makes us all think back for those of us who were here. The little boys and the little girls across this country and across this world who have benefited here now 50 years later from all of the activism of not only Martin Luther King, but all those who stood with him. For every hose that was put onto people, every dog that was unleashed, everyone who protests, everyone who acted in a nonviolent fashion, determined to make this country, this nation, this world a better place for all of us to live in. Well, now we're 50 years from that day, and all those little boys and little girls are just like me right now, as I was a little girl back then. We're grown. And so it's now our turn. It's our turn to make the path. It's our turn to fight back, to stand up, to speak up, and to do our part. So those little girls and little boys of today can stand here 50 years from now and see how far we've come. And they can see how far we still have to go. Again, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this, because I am a product of what was happening so many years ago. I will forever be grateful for all the sacrifices for those who came before me, and I will make sure that I do my part, and the City Council will make sure that it does its part for the little girls and little boys of today. Thank you.
At this time, we have a very special treat. If we can get everyone to stand for a very special treat, the combined choirs of Clark, Spelman, and Morehouse, and lift every voice and sing. All right. We'd like to welcome the students from the Atlanta International School who are with us today. You all can make some noise. Thank you for attending today. I'd like to bring up at this time someone that needs no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Ms. Kim Fields.
Good afternoon. It is indeed my great honor and privilege to be here this afternoon with all of you. To all of the offspring, as you were lovingly called, for the civil rights movement, thank you for being here. Thank you for your dedication to your parents' legacy, to your family's legacy. Thank you, my sister friend Bernice King, for asking me to be here. I'll tell you what, when you get a text from Bernice, you don't even really read it. You just say, okay, and then you hit send. With over 40 years of experience as a community leader, politician, minister, and advocate, he is one of America's most renowned civil rights leaders. He serves as the host of Politics Nation on MSNBC. Please welcome to the stage, Reverend Al Sharpton.
Thank you. First, let's give a big hand to Elder Bernice King for convening us. Dr. King was killed. We all have heard over the last week how he was killed. But we must always remember why he was killed. He was killed because he stood up for what was right and righteous for the cause of humanity. It wasn't a drive-by shooting, it was intentional, because he raised the issue of justice in a land at that time where institutional iniquity and injustice was reigning. But he marched without hate and marched without violence. And we come today to not just remember the last 50 years, but to look 50 years forward. Because Dr. King was a dreamer, but he wasn't asleep. Some of y'all are sleep dreaming and sleepwalking. He was dreaming while he worked. He was dreaming while he marched. He was dreaming while he fed the hungry. He was dreaming while he provided people the right to vote. Don't go to sleep to dream. Get up and get some work done to dream. The theologian that he loved, that I hear Elder Bernice quote so often, was Paul Tillich, who talked about love, power, and justice. You must fight because you love humanity. You must institute the power to instill and institute and legislate what you love. But you must balance it with justice. And we are still fighting those battles. Whether it's in Sacramento, California, whether it's mass incarceration, we must keep on marching, and we must keep on fighting, and we must keep on voting. It's not enough to talk about how grand we were. We must rise to the occasion, and we must lift our children so they could rise. I was 13 and just became youth director of New York Breadbasket under Reverend Jesse Jackson, whose daughter's here representing them today, Santita. And I remember when Dr. King was killed and grew up in that movement. And then it's our duty to pass it on to the generations behind us. Bernice has touched the Mary Pat Hecton National Action Network, our organization. We must be like geese when they fly. If you see geese fly, they're in formation. One goose is out front. But being out front, you take the wind first. You take the debris first. So they take it as long as they can, and then they get back in formation, and another goose will come and take the front. We should at least have as much sense as geese to know that we should fly in formation. It's not about any one of any of us. And know that Dr. King said, as I close, that we would have some difficult days ahead. and we're going through difficult days. But he also promised that we'd get to the promised land. David said, I've seen many things, but one thing I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor their seed beg for bread. March on, dream on, vote on. Don't you give up now. We got 50 more years to go. Thank you and God bless you.
One more time for the Reverend, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. I'd like to welcome to the stage now Elena Simmons. Elena Simmons, please come up.
Sierra Bobo is coming up next for a message of love. Sierra?
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Can y'all do me a big favor? Can y'all make some noise right now for the sacrifice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the King Center for putting this on? Yes, 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 yes. I'm truly honored today to have the opportunity to talk about a subject that's very dear to my heart, which is love. And growing up in the south side of Atlanta, College Park, I was taught in the community that to walk in love actually made you soft. So for a long time, I did everything in my power to make sure I wasn't soft. And actually, I was making sure that I wasn't loving. And so a lot of times in the community, we talk about we don't like to be around fake people and things like that. And so I did some research, and the more that I studied at the King Center of Dr. King's philosophy, Nonviolence 365, I realized that to love somebody that you don't like doesn't make you soft. It makes you courageous. And Dr. King actually said that, you know, in order to walk in love, in order to be nonviolent, it takes a courageous person that's not cowardly. And so I had to really change my perspective on what it means to be soft and what it means to be hard. Because here's the thing. If we don't love each other, if we don't stop being selfish, let's just be honest. If we don't stop being selfish and make a decision and make a true quality choice to love one another, we're going to all kill each other. And we got to stop and say, you know what? I love myself enough to respect the person standing next to me, even if I don't agree with the person standing next to me. And so I just want to encourage us today, as we talk about love, it starts with you. I need everybody to say this after me. Say, it starts with me. Say, it starts with me. Nothing is soft about love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Matter of fact, you were made in the image of love. And we're not truly ourselves until we make a decision to be who we are. And I believe that the world is crying out right now with violence because they're waiting for the real you to stand up. And the real you is the person that stands in love, that walks in love, is not afraid to be loving. And listen, we're going to disagree. Conflict is normal. But I can disagree with you and not have to harm you. I can sit down at the table and come to you and say, you know what, what's going on? How can we work this out? Let me understand your perspective. Listen to mine. But I just want to encourage us today as we come and we push towards the next 50 years that we make a decision. You know what? I'm going to be in the next 50 years making sure I stand in the position of love. And so I just want to thank you for your time today. And everybody say this after me. Say, I will. You guys say it with a little more attitude. I'm from Atlanta. Say, I will. I will be the change. Thank y'all so much.
I am reminded of the amazing lyrics. Love is in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Coming up next, we have an amazing musician. Now, many soul singers have Southern roots, but not many are born, bred, and call the South their home, like our next musical guest. He was a member of Adam Levine's team on NBC's hit show, The Voice, and he gained worldwide exposure. Now he is here with us today. Please welcome the talented and quite soulful Chris Cawley.
Georgia.
Thanks for joining us. This is, we were just in Georgia. There was some people speaking there to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's funeral. Just to update you, you just saw Reverend Al Sharpton speak, as well as a couple other people. There was some music that was playing there as well. So it looked like a nice gathering there. That's in the Georgia Capitol. Hundreds of people are marching. They marched to downtown Atlanta to mark the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's funeral. And they were just holding some speeches there, and we're just reliving and honoring the life of Dr. King. So coming up, we're going to be checking in at the White House. There'll be a press briefing from, I believe, Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be updating us. And then we also have, depending on who goes first, we're watching both, but Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona said Monday that there are going to be over 200 members of the state's National Guard are being sent to the U.S.-Mexico border to support the president in his call for troops to fight drug trafficking and illegal immigration at the border. And more of the Guard will be deployed on Tuesday. So we're awaiting him, and we'll check back on that. We're not sure when either is going to happen, but momentarily, I'm looking at the feeds right now, and I see the podium at the White House is also empty, so they're awaiting the communications director, Sarah Sanders, to speak, give an update. There's been obviously a lot of talk since the investigation with Cambridge Analytica and the Russia scandal, as well as just general hacking on everyday use of information online, your information online, my information online. There was a release from Facebook if your information was possibly leaked through the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So they're going into that. Mark Zuckerberg is due to testify this week as well. So we will hear the latest from that. And they're also going to be potentially talking about tariffs. That's also been a big part of what we're talking about here in DC. So we'll check back and see what's going on with that. Let's see what's going on in Arizona.
That's federal property. Yeah. Yeah. This is IKEA. That's what he's serving. Dope. Mine's got little legs on it. It should be. Keep turning? Yeah. It's because it's underneath that wheel. Everyone smile for the camera.
Oh, sorry. Scoot it a little bit. There we go. Yeah.
All right, we're still waiting on both of those things. Let's check back in Atlanta. We're going to go back again to the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's funeral. Let's check back and see what they're talking about now.
About Dr. King, because his dignity demanded more. His dignity demanded that he face racism itself, to look it directly in his eye and create an opportunity for his people. Because how many ways do you want to beat racism? Do you want to give it an uppercut? No, dignity says give it a roundhouse too. And if you have to walk into the halls of the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the Libertarian Party, your love must be deep enough not to retreat and to do it in dignity. So I thank you for the work that you've done. I thank you for the community, King Center, that you are building, the beloved community. And I close with this story. When I was in the first grade, I met poverty, not just within myself, but for the first time I saw this poverty on the face of a little white boy. And it looked different on his face. It looked like desperation more than I'd ever seen before. And the reason is because he'd been told that he couldn't be poorer than me, that he was supposed to be superior to me. And what we do in politics today is we drive fear in man, and we tell that little boy while he's sitting at the table with his granddad and grandmother that those people are the problem. But we're suffering from the same problems. The economic problems that are facing all of us are a shared problem. Dr. King knew that. Let's finish his work. Let's love all people, and let's restore dignity in America. Thank you very much.
A singer-songwriter, he has a unique sound that incorporates equal measures of vintage soul, gospel, and R&B. Please welcome to the stage, Leon Timbo.
All right, so I do see that that Governor Ducey from Arizona is speaking. Let's go check in with him right now.
Authorizing National Guard troops to deploy to the U.S. border. The operation is going to be known as Operation Guardian Shield. Now, working with our federal partners and under that authority, that's why I've called you up here today. Your mission is to support the efforts of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security in their efforts to secure the border and keep the communities on the border safe. This mission is about providing manpower and resources to support federal, state, county, tribal, and local law enforcement agencies in stopping the flow of criminals, narcotics, weapons, and ammunition that is being trafficked into our state. Your support will free up the border agents to serve on the border, allowing us to put more boots on the ground. Your efforts will make every Arizonan and our country safer. As members of the Arizona National Guard, you are part of a highly trained and experienced professional service unit. You have experience performing missions in our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. I've personally witnessed your excellence with which you carry out your duties. And no doubt that this mission will be carried out with the same professionalism and capability that Arizona's National Guard is known for. As citizen service members, your mantra is always ready, always there. Your efficient and quick mobilization over the past 72 hours is testament to that. I want to thank you for your service to our country, and may God bless you and keep you safe on this mission. Very grateful for what you do, and I appreciate you being here on such a moment's notice. Thank you.
Thanks for your service.
All right, that was Governor Doug Ducey from Arizona. You just saw him address the National Guard. that he's been talking about sending 225 troops to the Mexico border. This is in support of President Trump, who's been making announcements since last week that they are going to be further structuring the border by adding troops. He's also obviously been pushing for a physical border, for a wall to be put into place. But while he's working on that, he is supporting the president and adding more troops. And then there's also going to be other troops deployed tomorrow. And this is being the Arizona troops were being sent since Texas also announced Friday that they're going to be sending 250 National Guard members, and they were flown in by helicopter. So we will be keeping tabs on that, and I'm curious what their role will be, either with helping with national security people or for Homeland Security officials down there, but we will check back and see what's going on. I'm sure there are other states along the border that will be discussing what their next moves will be, and using their troops to continue that, if even federal officers and Army. So we will check back and see what's going on there. We're still waiting on Sarah Sanders to come up and speak, and we can check back in. We can bring back for you some other things that have been going on for today. Bill Cosby, the trial has started for him through jury selection, and we'll see what's going on next. Let's see what's going on. This is actually, there was a topless protester that was there in Pennsylvania for Cosby. So let's see what's going on with that. I'll show you a bit of that report from earlier today. Sorry about that. Let's see. We're still getting some audio from the march and the speakers in Atlanta. But the governor in Arizona is still talking. He came up and talked to the press, so we can bring that up for you.
Our Adjutant General, Mick McGuire, and the Department of Public Safety, Frank Milstead, and the Border Strike Force to make sure that our border is secure and to stop this flow of drugs and illegal migrants.
Why is a 1 month number a source of a crisis when crossings have been plunging over the last several years?
I think, Bram, it's the surge of what happened in March, where there was a decrease. To see the decrease, this has been an issue in the state of Arizona for nearly a decade. Washington was not paying attention to this for nearly a decade. Thank goodness we have a federal government that will finally pay some attention to what's happening on the border.
Governor, you're going to go talk to the Chicanos por la Casa on Thursday. They're a big migrant support group. How are you going to, face them, knowing that you're militarizing the border in a way that a lot of folks believe is totally unnecessary?
I'm going to walk right in there, and I'm going to talk to them about all the good things that are happening here in the state of Arizona. And I think, everyone I talk to, I don't think that this is a partisan issue or an identity issue. You show me somebody who's for drug cartels or human trafficking or this that's coming over a wide open and unprotected border. That's what we're doing here, and we're focusing on both law enforcement and making the state as good a place as possible to live, and it is a very welcoming and inviting state.
Are you concerned about having guard troops, these are militarily trained people, out on the border rather than civilians?
These guard troops are there to support the Border Patrol, so it allows us to get more from the Border Patrol to the border. It gets more boots on the ground, and they serve in a support capacity, which they'll be very good at.
Should they be building the wall as well, Governor?
Well, border security is a top concern here. 2/3 of our border already has a wall. So if we want to fill in the other third with a wall, I would welcome that. I don't like how our border is wide open and unsecured, specifically in the Tucson sector. I also think we can use boots on the ground and technology. And my specific focus on this and the conversations with Secretary Nielsen and with President Trump have been around the drug cartels and the human trafficking that's happening.
What's it going to cost and who's paying for it?
This is going to be paid for under Title 32, under the Department of Defense. The federal government is going to foot the bill here.
And Governor, what's the success of this mission going to look like? And you can address the answer to my camera guy who's over there.
Well, I think the success of this mission is going to be around, do we stop the flow of illegal drugs? Do we stop the flow of human trafficking? Can we stop illegal migrants from coming over? Those will be the numbers that are the measurement.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute.
300,000 people crossed. They're all illegal. So, what's the end point?
Wait a minute, Bram. What do you mean that that's not going to happen? So we should just sit back and let whatever's going on happen? We had a 200% increase in traffic across the border. The people that are suffering the drug overdoses, oftentimes these products are coming over the border and through our state. We have a federal government that's paying attention to it. We have a border patrol that is going to go to the border, and we have a National Guard in Arizona that's going to be there to support
I think
I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go there.
I think Dennis's question very specifically was, what percentage cutback in crossings do you need to declare this a success?
Well, listen, we're always going to have bad guys, and we're going to always have people that want to sell drugs or want to bring people over in this human trafficking industry. We want to address that. We want to hit it as hard as we can. I'd like to see it eliminated, but I think you could call it success if you're reducing it and reducing it dramatically.
Are there already concrete plans to have them help continue finish the border wall?
This action that was put in place by Secretary Mattis is to deploy the National Guard to be able to go to the border to support Customs and Border Patrol in their role so that we can get more border agents to the border. This isn't specifically around a border wall, but it certainly is about border security.
But these are some of the most secure places along the border. If you look at Yuma, why would you send that year? I mean, there was a peak, I think, in 2000 to over 600,000 crossings.
So I'd encourage you to get to the Tucson sector if you think it's one of the most secure places across the border.
If you look at the numbers, there have been dramatic decreases
Dennis,
in border
and there's been a 200% increase in migrant flow year over year in March, and that's the reason for the order.
Bottom line, this is a lot of folks believe this is just a blatantly political thing. The president wants, to secure the border. You're jumping on board. It's not costing you anything, yet you get the limelight. Talk to us about why this isn't political for you.
Well, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. This is something we've been talking about in Arizona for over a decade. In many ways, our state has been the epicenter for the discussion around border security. Washington has ignored the border. We finally have an administration that is paying attention to the border, and we're going to be deploying Border Patrol with the support of the Arizona National Guard, and it starts today.
Governor, the Border Patrol doubled under President Obama. You can't say...
So we're going to catch right over to Sarah Sanders. She's speaking at the White House addressing the media. We're going to check in with her.
The president has noted that Russia and Iran also bear responsibility for these acts, since they would not be possible without their material support. It is also now clear that Russia has betrayed its obligations to guarantee the end of the Syrian regime's chemical weapons program. The president and his national security team are consulting closely with allies and partners to determine the appropriate response. As President Trump clearly stated, there will be a price to pay. We call on all members of the international community to share any information related to this attack and to hold the perpetrators and their sponsors accountable. And we call upon the Syrian regime and Russia to open the area to international medical assistance and international monitoring. And with that, I'll take your questions. John.
The president was pretty definitive today in saying that this was an attack with banned chemical weapons.
yet there hasn't been a concrete proof of that. Russia insists that there is no evidence of chemical weapons. What makes the president so sure that he is willing to make such a declarative statement?
The president is confident. He's been briefed by his national security team and being kept up to date constantly and regularly on the intelligence around that. And I can't get any further beyond that at this point.
Do we have any proof at this point that it was in fact a chemical weapon?
Once again, I can't get anything beyond the comments that we've already made, but we're very confident in those comments.
Sarah, it was just a couple of weeks ago the president was talking about wanting to leave Syria very quickly. Now you're saying that there's a price that has to be paid. Does the president believe that there are some things that are so atrocious, which is the phrase he used this morning, that the United States is in fact the world's policeman, and it demands a response, it demands the presence of the United States government in the region?
Like the president wants to bring our troops home after we complete the mission to eradicate ISIS in Syria. At the same time, he wants to make sure Assad is deterred from chemical weapons attacks on innocent civilians. Signaling we want to remove our troops in no way degrades our ability to hold parties responsible. Mike.
Has the president been briefed that his comments about wanting to leave Syria could have played a part and have emboldened Assad and played a part in these attacks?
The only individuals that played a part don't reside in this country, and I think we've made very clear who we think is responsible for these attacks, and to try to conflate that and make this on any part and blame on this president is absolutely ridiculous.
He has criticized others for signaling military plans. It seems to be what he was doing here. Does he regret those comments that he made last week?
The president's been clear that he wants to make sure that we have the defeat of ISIS. We've also been clear in our actions, as you have seen after previous chemical attacks, what this president has done, and I think we've been very upfront on that.
Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. First, the news out of Syria this morning about apparent strikes carried out overnight. Does the United States believe that Israel was behind those strikes, as the number of reports claimed? Was the United States given a heads up by the Israeli government?
I can only speak on behalf of this government. For questions on that, I would refer you outside. I can tell you at this time the United States is not conducting airstrikes in Syria, but I can't go beyond that at this point in time.
So from the White House perspective, did the White House get a heads up from any foreign government about conducting strikes in Syria?
Again, I can't go any further than commenting on behalf of our government, and I can tell you that currently at this time the United States is not conducting airstrikes in Syria.
Back on the deterrence for a moment, you said the president wants to make sure that the Assad regime can't conduct attacks like this in the future. Last year, when the president launched those cruise missiles, he had said there was a deterrent. Obviously, what has changed between sort of months ago when the Assad regime wasn't using chemical weapons and this strike now? It seemed to be the timing coming so soon after the president making that determination on wanting to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, that there was you can see why we're drawing the timing there. So why, in the president's estimation, did his deterrence, his attempt to sort of establish a deterrent effect on the Assad regime now failing?
Once again, the president has made clear that with the defeat of ISIS, he wanted to be able to bring our troops home. But at the same time, he wants to make sure that Assad is deterred from chemical weapons attacks on innocent civilians. We think you can have separation. John?
Sarah? But Sarah, didn't the president, by saying that he wants to get out of Syria, essentially give a green light to Assad to do this, as John McCain has suggested, that the United States was leaving, was kind of pulling up and leaving it to...
Look, we're still there, and I think that it is outrageous to say that the President of the United States greenlit something as atrocious as the actions that have taken place over the last several days. The President, once again, made very clear how he feels about those types of actions when this took place roughly a year ago, and we're going to continue looking at all of our options on the table currently.
Well, John McCain said that emboldened Assad, that this was sending a message to Assad. Is that still his position?
I think the message that we sent to Assad was very clear, both in the president's words over the weekend and in our actions that we've taken in the past. Roberta.
Has the president's attitude toward Vladimir Putin changed because of what's happened?
The president has always been tough on Russia, as he said last week, as I echoed again when asked about it. This administration and this president have been tougher on Russia than previous administrations. I think you can see that both through the actions that we've taken and in the comments over the last several days.
But he singled out Vladimir Putin in the tweet yesterday. Does he feel that he can still sort of find some common ground and work with him on various things?
The president still feels that if we can have a good relationship with Russia at some point, that's a good thing for the world. But at the same time, this president is going to be tough on Russia until we see some changes in their behavior, just as we've done every day over the last year, and as we've outlined multiple times before, both from the president and as I've done from this podium on many occasions. John, in the back.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Two questions on the foreign policy front. Given the situation in Syria and your statement today, could the president be in the process of forming an alliance with President Macron in France and Prime Minister May in Britain, not unlike that envisioned by the previous administration with France and Britain when the first reports of chemical weapons came out?
Certainly have great relationship with both countries and are continuing conversations with both the UK as well as France, and hope to work with all of our allies and partners in a response. Sorry, second question.
Is Prime Minister Orban, an admirer of the president who has said many kind things about him, won a landslide re-election. Will the president call him, and are there any plans to extend an invitation for a state visit or a working visit to Prime Minister Orban?
I'm not aware of a scheduled call at this time, but if there is one, we'll keep you posted and likely have a readout to follow. John Decker.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Today is the first day on the job for John Bolton as the National Security Advisor. Perhaps you can bring him out here one time and he can take our questions.
I'll be happy to tag him in at some point.
Please do. I wanted to ask you about some comments that he made about Syria back in 2013 on Fox and Friends. He said, "I think if I were a member of Congress, I would vote against an authorization to use force in Syria." He continued, "I don't think it is in America's interests. I don't think we should, in effect, take sides in the Syrian conflict." Is that a point of view that Ambassador Bolton is bringing to the table now as National Security Advisor?
The point of view that matters most here at the White House, as you well know, is the president's. And as Ambassador Bolton himself has said, he's certainly here to serve as an advisor, but ultimately the decisions being made are the president's, and the comments that he's made previously are personal, and he's here to carry out the president's agenda. Josh.
Scott Pruitt, EPA administrator, often flew first class, had a $50 a night rental on Capitol Hill, and tripled the size of his security detail. Can you explain what the president meant when he said rent was about market rate, travel expenses okay, security spending somewhat more, but it was okay? Why did he say that?
He was referencing a report done by the EPA, which we are continuing to review. But in that, it cites that the apartment was at market value and goes into other details, and that was what the president was reflecting.
$50 a night on Capitol Hill with lobbies, that was a market value according to the EPA?
Yes, according to the Office of Government Ethics.
Travel spending okay. Is the president okay with cabinet secretaries taking first class travel and tripling the size of their security detail? Is that okay?
Again, we are reviewing the specifics of each of those components. I know there was a much larger number of security issues surrounding the EPA administrator than in the past, but for specific questions beyond that, I'd refer you back to the EPA.
Were those security issues, or were those included in police reports? Because there's been reporting that across the country no one found the death threats or police reports that jeopardized his life or safety. What are you talking about?
I can't comment about police reports, but I do know that there have been a number of questions raised. And again, we're continuing to review that. Until that's complete, I'd refer you back to the EPA beyond that.
Sarah, two questions on Syria. With all that's happened with Russia, with the sanctions last week and now these strong words associating Russia with the Syrian attack, is there an expectation or a feeling that diplomatic relations with Russia, with this administration, with our country, with Russia, are eroding?
we've been very tough on Russia for quite some time. I think the only people maybe that didn't understand that or see that were members of the press who continually questioned that. Now I guess people are concerned that we're being tough on Russia. I guess I'm confused on which way you want to have it. The president would like to have a good relationship, but that's going to be determined by the actions that Russia takes, and we're going to continue pushing forward.
And second question, the items on the table, beyond strikes, is there a thought or on the table regime change with Assad? And also, where does diplomacy play in this, even with the strikes and all of this that you're saying is on the table?
I'm not going to get ahead of any potential options that the president may or may not take, but I can tell you that we're reviewing a wide range and a number of different options. Dave?
Thanks, Sarah. At the cabinet meeting this morning, the president was talking about the potential impact of Chinese tariffs on American farmers, and he said the farmers are patriots for being willing to take a hit. And then he said, we'll make it up to them. What did he mean?
The president has worked with his team to determine how best to respond to China's attack on American farmers, and he's asked the Department of Agriculture to protect our farmers, and will present a plan on specifics of that shortly.
Would you consider like extra crop insurance subsidies that are often put in the farm bill for market fluctuations?
I'm not going to get ahead of potential options, but the president has asked the Department of Agriculture to come back with some specifics that we'll announce to you guys shortly. Hal?
Thanks, Sarah. I've got two for you. First on Syria, we talked about the idea of a possible military option being a deterrent. Last year, we heard something very similar from the president, who called that chemical attack last year an affront to humanity, said it cannot be tolerated. Is the White House worried that Assad is now making a mockery of President Trump's threats?
Not at all. What our concern is about is the fact that the Assad regime has taken an outrageous action against innocent civilians. Our focus is on responding to that, and that's what we're looking at.
And then I wanted to follow up on something from last week, just because we didn't get a chance to, and specifically your comments citing the LA Times article when asked, I think by John here, about the president's rape remarks at that event last week. That didn't actually back up the president's claims. You actually, last fall, admonished reporters to make sure that we hold ourselves to a high standard of accuracy. Does the president also need to be held to that same standard of accuracy?
Absolutely, and as I said that day, it has been well documented that a number of those individuals, going back even to 2014, where there were multiple articles and studies put out that said 80% of the women that make that that go through that process and try to enter the country are raped through that process. Something certainly that I think should be concerning to all of us, and certainly something that the president has voiced concern about.
And what about the voter fraud claim that the president made last week as well, also not backed up by evidence?
I'm sorry, can you be more specific?
Yeah, the president talked about those claims of voter fraud again. It's something he's repeatedly brought up. It's just getting to the idea when words matter, particularly in moments of a lot of international pressure, like this moment right now, what his standard of accuracy is when he's speaking to the American public.
The president still strongly feels that there was a large amount of voter fraud and attempted to do a thorough review of it, but a lot of the states didn't want to cooperate and participate. We certainly know that there were a large number of incidences reported, but we can't be sure exactly how much because we weren't able to conduct the full review that the president wanted because a number of states did not want to cooperate and refused to participate. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, two questions regarding Scott Pruitt. How long is the review going to take that the White House is conducting?
I'm not going to lay out an arbitrary timeline, but it's something that we're looking into and continuing to, take under consideration.
Or years?
I mean, obviously we want to get through this process as quickly as we can, but I'm not going to just make up a time frame here today.
Okay, and did Chief of Staff John Kelly recommend that Pruitt be fired?
I'm not going to get into any private conversations. Blake, welcome back.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, appreciate it. I want to ask you about Mark Zuckerberg headed to the Hill to testify. This administration has often talked about deregulation and the deregulatory efforts of the president and this administration has undergone, but there's a question of whether or not Facebook should be regulated. Does the White House have a stance on whether or not Facebook should be regulated, and if so, what is that position?
I don't have a specific policy announcement on that front, but I think we're all looking forward to that testimony today.
What does the president make of Mark Zuckerberg? Does he have an opinion of him? Larry Kudlow was fairly critical of him, both on Fox News Sunday yesterday And when I asked him about Zuckerberg this morning, does the president have any sort of opinion on Mark Zuckerberg?
You know, I haven't asked him directly. I'd have to check and get back to you. Take one last question, Jim.
Is there anything that the Syrians can do at this point to prevent military action from being taken?
I'm not going to get ahead of what actions we may or may not take, so I can't really answer that question, but we'll keep you posted when we have something on that front.
And if I can follow up, just because, you know, you've been saying this over the last couple of weeks that nobody has been tougher on Russia and Vladimir Putin than this president. Isn't there some hyperbole in that when you say that? I mean, obviously Ronald Reagan said tear down this wall. John Kennedy put up a blockade around Cuba. Carter boycotted the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. Obviously, there have been presidents over the course of the last several decades who have been tougher on this president. Also, given the fact that this president, up until just recently, wasn't really willing to criticize Vladimir Putin by name. We all saw that over the weekend and took that as a new development.
Yeah, you cite like one example for each of those individuals. Let me list off just a few of the actions that the president has taken that previous administrations haven't. The Treasury Department issued new sanctions on numerous individuals and entities in Russia. The president's continued other sanctions on Russia's malicious cyber activity in response to election hacking. He's expelled 60 Russian operatives from the United States and closed 2 consulates. The president's issued 4 statements condemning Russia's poisoning of UK citizens on UK soil. He's authorized the sale of lethal aid to Ukraine. He's authorized military strikes against the Assad regime in Syria and has repeatedly called out Russia's actions on that front. We've also exported energy to our allies in Eastern Europe. Look, I think that you named off 1 or 2 things. It is without dispute that this administration and this president has done a number of things to be tough on Russia.
So the president says that Vladimir Putin may pay a price for what's happening in Syria right now. After all, the Russians were supposed to be responsible for helping the Syrians remove the chemical weapons from Syria. When the president says that they may pay a price, we should take that to the bank?
I'm not going to get ahead, once again, of any actions that the United States may or may not take, but I think the president's been clear about what his intention is. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Sarah, why did the president oppose the sanctions on Russia if no one's been tougher than he has?
Thanks for checking back in. You just saw Sarah Sanders address the media about what's going on in the world of DC politics and what's going on with President Trump today and this week. There was a lot of discussion about the president's condemning of the attack in Syria, as well as the Russia investigation, and lots of different things. So there was a lot coming at you from that. Actually, while we have it, while that was a topic, I can actually bring up for you, the president released on Twitter through the Department of State a statement on the attack in Syria, and I can play that for you right now. Let's see.
And chemical weapons. It was an atrocious attack. It was horrible. You don't see things like that as bad as the news is around the world. You just don't see those images. We are studying that situation extremely closely. We are meeting with our military and everybody else, and we'll be making some major decisions over the next 24 to 48 hours. We are very concerned when a thing like that can happen. This is about humanity. We're talking about humanity. It can't be allowed to happen. So we'll be looking at that barbaric act and studying what's going on. We're trying to get people in there. As you know, it's been surrounded, so it's very hard to get people in because not only has it been hit, it's been surrounded. And if they're innocent, why aren't they allowing people to go in and through it? Because you know they're claiming they didn't make the attack. So if it's Russia, if it's Syria, if it's Iran, if it's all of them together, we'll figure it out and we'll know the answers quite soon. So we're looking at that very, very strongly and very seriously.
So that was the president. That was the president talking. He released a statement earlier today on Twitter. This was through the Department of State's Twitter page that he retweeted, and he made a promise to make a quick decision on a response and condemn the attack that happened over the weekend. At least 40 people, including children, were killed, and there's been some questions about whether or not Russian President Vladimir Putin was involved, and he said he may, and if he does, he's going to be it's going to be very tough, and everybody's going to pay a price. He will, everybody will. So it's something that the president appears to be taking seriously, especially with the previous allegations and current allegations about collusion with the Russian government and involvement with the Russian government. So we will see what happens with that. We actually have a report on it today from Fox News.
Discrete areas of concern with their own strategies and tactics and commitments and constituencies. No, we must learn to work and live at the complex intersections of difference and diversity. We don't live in an either-or world, and our movement...
Sorry, that was from the Martin Luther King piece that we have playing right now as well. Let's put that on hold for one moment while we continue with that story. Hold on.
Another deadly chemical attack in Syria over the weekend, targeting rebels in a Damascus suburb. President Trump claims the Syrian government is responsible. He's meeting with senior military leaders at the White House today and says, quote, major decisions will be made about the U.S. response in the next 24 to 48 hours.
This is about humanity. We're talking about humanity. And it can't be allowed to happen.
U.S. military assets in the region are now being deployed to positions around Syria, including the USS Donald Cook, the same type of warship that fired cruise missiles at a Syrian base last year. The Pentagon now looking to Russia, Syria's most powerful ally, for answers about how the chemical attack was allowed to happen.
The first thing we have to look at is why a chemical weapon still being used at all when Russia was the framework guarantor of removing all the chemical weapons.
But the Russian government denies the attack took place, calling it a provocation by rebel groups and accusing the U.S. of fabricating a crisis in order to justify keeping American troops in the region.
These parties, primarily the members of the American coalition and the Americans, aren't aiming to leave Syria, but to settle there for a very long time.
The Pentagon is also consulting with U.S. allies in the Middle East, Europe, and elsewhere, hoping to present a unified response to the chemical attack. In Jerusalem, Connor Powell, Fox News.
So that was a report from Fox News about the president's reaction to the bombing in Syria, and we just heard before that Sarah Sanders addressing the media about it. So this is obviously something that we're going to be paying close attention to. And you heard a little bit earlier there are some people speaking at a rally in Atlanta. And about the funeral, the 50th anniversary of the funeral of the late Dr. Martin Luther King. We can join in with that, but I think that'll be it for us today. But thank you all for watching. We're going to check in. This is, well, he just finished, but we're going to see if somebody else is coming up, but we can check in on that before we head out for today.
When Russia was the framework guarantor of removing all the chemical weapons.
But the Russian government denies the attack took
Well, come on, start that track. Let's do it like this. If you know it, help me sing it. If you will, bless the Lord at all times.
No, it was music. Like, right now it's gonna go back, it was music. And then I was like, oh, that's tricky. I've been, okay, so